The ongoing and sometimes violent conflict between taxi operators and e-hailing drivers, like those from Uber and Bolt, has been a major concern for commuters and the industry alike. Recent shootings in Soweto and KwaZulu-Natal have highlighted the urgent need for solutions. But big changes are on the horizon. After over a decade in the making, the National Land Transport Amendment Act, NLTA, has been signed into law. It aims to formally bring e-hailing services under a clear regulatory framework for the first time, with the goal of creating a level playing field, improving safety and ending the clashes. Now, to help us understand what this means for drivers, passengers and the future of transport in South Africa, we're joined live by Collen Msibi, the spokesperson for the National Department of Transport. Mr. Msibi, always good to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks, and thanks for having us.
Now, let's start off with that violence in KwaDabeka, Claremont in Soweto. From the department's perspective, what is the root cause of this conflict and how will the NLTA deal with it? Well,
thanks for the opportunity. I think the issue has always been rivalry amongst the operators. And I think even the one in KZN is not different from that. It's obviously a criminal issue. And that is why I think in KZN, it is alleged some of the perpetrators have been arrested. But the role that we play as the Department of Transport, National Department of Transport, it is to ensure that there is proper regulation when it comes specifically to the issue of e-hailing service. And that is why you've spoken, your preface, you spoke about the issue of the legislation that is coming into effect. In fact, the nomadic landing for it, I think at the very most, it would be the 12th of September. It's going to come into effect. It is basically to try and regulate these issues and also partly to deal with the issue of cabotage. So in a nutshell, the biggest problems in the industry has always been the encroachment, route encroachments. In other words, people go for profitable routes, and which leads obviously to issues of violence.
So let's talk about NLTA Act and how it's going to level the playing field, because that's been an issue, right? That the taxi operators in particular have talked to an unfairness in the current landscape. So what are the changes that are coming into effect and how will they level that playing field and deal with this animosity or this rivalry that we're seeing at the moment?
Well, I think it is going to assist in a long run because, one, since around 2013 up to now, we've been using what we call the charter permits. We issued a notice to provinces because remember, this is a provincial competence in terms of how we manage issue permits and so forth. It is done at the provincial level. So we've been using what we call charter permits for the e-hailing service, as well as the meter taxi operating licenses, to try and have an interim solution while we finalize the legislation as well as the regulations. So now that the regulations are approved, they are going to be implemented. Part of what will happen, one, we would need to use a registered app to operate. It has to be registered with the public transport regulator, which is at provincial levels. Secondly, there needs to be what you call the operating license issued. In other words, those, for instance, who've been having these permits would have to convert to an operating license to operate. In the cases where there hasn't been that kind of a dispensation, like for instance in KZN, that particular dispensation wasn't implemented. So they would have to basically start afresh, go and apply for an operating license, especially the e-hailing operators. Thirdly, the cars must be marked. In other words, you should be able to see that this vehicle is an e-hailing service, but the markings or branding must also show from which area it comes from, because your operating license will specify that you have to only operate in this specific area. You can't go to another jurisdiction.
So give us an example, Mr. Msibi. So I, for instance, might decide that I'm taking an Uber from CBD in Johannesburg, and I want to go across town to Sandton, or go across down to Midrand, right? Do we have an idea of the size of this area that we're talking about? Because the nature of e-hailing suggests that you can go from the airport to Soweto. You can go from Soweto to Alberton, for instance.
Yes. You see, that's the whole point of regulation, because you've got to demarcate the areas. It can't be a free-for-all. So, for instance, if you are operating in Tshwane, and then you've got to transport somebody to Limpopo, as an example, the expectation is that you've got to drop your passenger and go back to your area.
So you literally get to a border of some sort, drop them off, and they pick up another ride.
You've got, because remember, e-hailing service is a door-to-door service.
Yes.
So you've got to drop that person at the door where they are going.
Correct.
And then head back to where you are registered. Hence, I'm talking about the issue of the cabotage. Because the cabotage, what it does, you could go and then pick up somebody from that side and come back. And what does it do? You are competing now with a local person or an operator who's registered in Limpopo. And that's when the issues of competition start, and destructive competition that you see.
So what you're saying is that journey one way is permissible.
It is permissible.
It's a problem where you want to pick up in a territory that you're not, that is not in your jurisdiction.
It's not.
Where the issue arises.
You're not registered there. You've got to go back to where you are operating, where you are registered.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the key issues has obviously been engagement, right? When the taxi operators were talking about the MEC of Transport in KZN, many of them spoke about how he stepped in and there was a process of engagement. So let's talk about how you are engaging the various parties ahead of the implementation of this act.
Well, I think the issue, the horses have bolted from your statement. The consultations have happened, and that is why we're where we are now.
Okay.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have the regulations without the consultations at the provincial level, including the taxi industry. We've had workshops where we've looked at the act, starting with the act itself, and of course with the regulations. So that has happened. And I think what we have at the moment is something that has been consulted with the industry and with the provinces as well, including the legislature. So it is something that has already been done.
So you're convinced that on implementation, we're not going to experience a measure of violence, or certainly a misunderstanding on how this new act will work?
Look, we've been having the charter permits and violence has been happening. So we're introducing the operating license now. So the issue is about the enforcement, because we've got to enforce. So that is where the provinces would have to ensure that the law enforcement authorities, they play their part. Because, I mean, it's all well and good to have these regulations, but if you do not enforce, we might as well be operating as though there is no any regulations in place. So it's quite important. I think the issue of implementation is also about the law enforcement.
Okay, I want to touch now on safety, and safety has always been a major concern with e-hailing services. Now, the Act mandates panic buttons, updated profile photos, criminal checks, etc., etc. How will you ensure compliance of this?
That's what I'm saying. I think there, for instance, the issue of having the photograph uploaded on the app, as a passenger, you've obviously, when you book the e-hailing operator, it will show the face of somebody on the app who's going to come and pick you up. But when the person arrives and it's not the person on the photo that you have, and the person is different who's picking you up, that's obviously the transgression that we're trying to address. So it is mainly for that reason, because people are not safe. But secondly, what we've introduced is the issue of the panic button in the vehicle itself. it is mainly to protect the driver, but also the passenger. So that when you feel unsafe, you are able to press the button and you can be able to someone help in that regard. So it is those, you may think it's minor, but it's quite important when it comes to the issues of safety. So then it becomes quite critical as well for the operators to ensure that these apps are registered with the regulator, because if they are not there, we are illegal, basically, in terms of your operation. So it's important that they need to be registered with the transport regulator.
Now, the panic button, is it a physical button that will be in the actual e-hailing vehicle?
It will be installed inside the vehicle, yes.
So there will be two buttons, one obviously for the driver and one for the passenger, I'd imagine.
Yes, yes.
Now, the Act also gives the Minister power to regulate e-hailing pricing. Is the intention to set fixed prices or just overlook the pricing in the industry?
Look, that's just above our pay grade, to be honest.
Okay.
Because the issues of price and competition, it is within the ambit of the Competition Commission. So as much as it is stated there, probably we may have to see how the Competition Commission comes into play when we have to venture into that particular area. But it is something that as a department, where we do not have that kind of a capacity to be setting prices. It has to be an institution like the Competition Commission to be able to assist us.
And final thoughts, Mr. Msibi, before we end. Now, a major goal, I'd imagine, is to prevent the oversupply of vehicles, right? Now, when the e-hailing vehicles came onto the market, there was a handful of them. So obviously business was good for them. The competition for ordinary taxis, if you meter taxis, if you will, was limited, right? Is part of this going to manage the numbers per geographical location to obviously ensure that business remains viable for both e-hailing and meter taxis and other services?
Well, that's the role of the regulator, because you've got to manage the saturation of the industry. So I suppose as you issue these operating licenses, you've got to also scan the area in terms of whether aren't we having enough already, and to be able to make the decisions on the basis of that kind of analysis. But I also want to say, you know, some of the institutions, for instance, the malls, the Gautrain, they've got to demarcate certain areas where the e-hailing service, you should be able to access it. For instance, the Mall of Africa, it's clear where you should be able to find the service. It's clear where you should be able to go for the taxi, the minibus taxi industry. So those are very important. But secondly, the management of those institutions must make sure that there's security around that, because they are serving their customers. It's like when you come out of the Gautrain, you go into the e-hailing service. So you can't say, now you're out of my hands. So you should be able to provide some kind of security and demarcate an area where the operators need to park their vehicles.
And finally, just very quickly, the consumer, the individual across the country who's making use of e-hailing services as well as riding the taxis, what can they look forward to? What are the benefits that will accrue to them?
Well, I suppose the benefits, it is safety as far as we're concerned. Because we've had so many stories of passengers being attacked and raped and so forth. So I think it would try and restore the reputation of the e-hailing service, and then people would have more trust in it when it comes to that in particular. So I think more regulations and registering of the apps and so forth, it would just make sure that there's integrity around this whole system, but also just to be assured that the service that we are using, at least you have been able to identify the individual on the app, but you are also seeing this individual physically, that it is the right person who's actually on the app. So I think it will go a long way in trying to reassure those who are using this service that it is safe.
Mr. Msibi, always good to speak to you. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.